The 2010s was definitely a very rough year for the Sonic the Hedgehog series. Like, this franchise is always known to be very hit or miss, but it was during this decade where it felt like the lows were very, very low. As well, the decade did start very strong with Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations, but then the series went into a complete nosedive when Sega decided to launch the Sonic Boom series, as this was a spin-off series that was trying to appeal more towards a Western audience. And unfortunately, that series flopped so badly, it literally crippled Sega financially at the time. And I feel like the only reason why Sonic Boom didn't really ruin the series' reputation compared to 06 is single-handedly because of the TV show being very funny.
But since then, I've gotten divorced, so your threats are meaningless. You're looking at a man with nothing left to lose.
It's 2:30 in the afternoon. People are trying to sleep.
But regardless, the Sonic series was definitely suffering around this time, as we barely got any content from the Sonic series, and it was especially hard on Sonic Team because after Generations, the next Sonic game that was ever well received by critics and fans was Sonic Frontiers 11 years later. As Sonic Lost World was a game that was very divisive by fans, I kinda like it. But the problem with that game is that it was trying to appeal towards Nintendo and Mario fans than Sonic fans. And Sonic Forces was a game that released directly after the Sonic Boom disaster, and the final result is probably one of the most barren Sonic Team games ever. It was definitely very rough, and what was not helping was Sega's god-awful marketing for Sonic at the time, where the best way to describe it is that it's probably the definition of self-deprecation. Because again, Sonic was literally a punching bag for a lot of people on the internet, especially on YouTube. However, despite all of that, there was definitely one glimmer of hope released in 2017. As in 2016, that was Sonic's 25th anniversary, and to celebrate, Sega announced two games, the first one being the one from Sonic Team, which was Sonic Forces, and the other one was a brand new 2D Sonic game called Sonic Mania. And what made this game very fascinating is that it was a game made by actual Sonic fans. Like, over the years, there has been plenty of crazy Sonic fan games released. Like, seriously though, out of all the video game franchises out there, Sonic easily has the most fan games out of all of them. With the main person in charge of all of this is a couple of people, the first one being Christian Whitehead. Now, this guy has created a couple of Sonic fan games over the years, with his most well-known one being a fan game called Sonic Nexus, although this is not actually the first time he actually collabed with Sega. As in 2011, he actually was contracted by them to work on a full remaster of Sonic CD. And so after working on that, as well as the remaster of Sonic 1 and 2, he, alongside another developer named Stealth, decided to pitch a new project to Sega, which is a full-blown new 2D entry in the style of the classic Genesis games, with the whole slogan of this game being "By the Mania, for the Mania." And even with the very first trailer, you could clearly tell that Sega had full-on confidence with this game. Because Sega went all out with the marketing for this game, and every time they have a brand new trailer, it always starts out with it saying Sega proudly presents. So this was definitely a game to look forward to back in 2017. I can really say that personally because I was very excited for Sonic Mania when it was first announced. Especially during the Nintendo Switch event when this game was announced for that console. And that alone made me even more excited because not only it was a very good looking Sonic game, but also it's even more exciting to try a brand new game on a shiny new console. And when it finally released back in 2017, it received universal acclaim as one of the highest rated Sonic games since Sonic Adventure 2. And as for me, when I was able to pick the game up, I played the everlasting hell out of this game as I've put so many hours into Sonic Mania. Honestly, out of all the games released in 2017, I think this is probably my third favorite game that released that year, alongside with stuff like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. So yeah, I have so many different things I want to talk about for Sonic Mania. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. Alrighty, so booting up the game, we are greeted to that ever so title screen. And man, out of all the Sonic title screens out there, this is definitely one of my favorites, as it's a really nice callback to the classic Genesis title screens, with so many more details, like the whole thing being rotating around this island like it's in Yoshi's Island. And Sonic himself just feels very lively with this cool animation. And if you wait along the title screen for a moment, you're greeted to this beautiful opening cutscenes, which basically tells you, yeah, you're really gonna have a good time with this game. But anyway, so for the story of Sonic Mania, it begins of Sonic and Tails investigating Angel Island, as a bunch of Eggman robots was able to dig out a mysterious artifact called the Phantom Ruby. which causes Sonic and Tails to teleport all the way to Green Hill Zone. Go. The story of this game is fairly straightforward, as it's mostly Sonic and Tails trying to stop Eggman, but how the game presents its story is very similar to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where every time you clear a zone, you'll be greeted to a small cutscene on how Sonic and Tails gets to the next level. And honestly, for a Genesis throwback like this, it works perfectly well. You know Eggman's doing bad, you know that this artifact is probably something Eggman wants, you gotta stop him. It's very simple and gets straight to the point of gameplay. And as for the gameplay, well, it's freaking Sonic the Hedgehog. You run fast, collect rings, and try to get to the end goal while trying to find all those elusive Chaos Emeralds. Now, when it comes to 2D Sonic games post-Genesis era, they always try to spice things up in a lot of ways. Like, the Sonic Advance games were fairly one-to-one to, like, the classic Genesis games in terms of, like, controls, but with a bit of a Sonic Adventure flair. With Sonic Advance 3 specifically evolutionizing the whole buddy aspect that was introduced in Sonic 2. But then we have the Sonic Rush games that had a big emphasis on the whole boost system. And then there's Sonic 4 Episode 1, which the main gimmick there is disappointment. But with Sonic Mania, they lean mostly towards the much more basic route with the Genesis games, and I feel like that works wondrous. Because out of all these Sonic games out there, the Genesis games are definitely like the most timeless out of them all. But not to say that they didn't try something new, because they did include a brand new move exclusive for Sonic where, if you jump in the air and then press and hold the jump button again, Sonic can do something called a drop dash, which allows Sonic to give a slight boost of speed. And honestly, this is a pretty good new addition because it really adds more to the game's flow, especially if you're using it on an incline, which gives you a really good sense of instant speed. And beyond Sonic, there's also Tails and Knuckles who are playable in this game once more, just like in the classic Genesis games. And they all work exactly the same, like Tails being able to fly and Knuckles being able to glide and climb. And not just that, but also, similar to 3 and Knuckles' story is slightly different compared to everyone else's. Like, the opening cutscene is fairly different, where Knuckles is chilling out on Angel Island before getting sucked into all of this. And then later on in the game, Knuckles would get his own exclusive level that only he can go through. And speaking of which, Sonic Mania has plenty of really stellar levels. And out of all the 2D Sonic games out there, this game is fairly meaty with content, as there's 12 different zones to go through, which makes this around on par with Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And as for the levels themselves, well, a huge chunk of them are actually reimagined versions of classic Sonic levels. As similar to something like Sonic Generations, Sonic Mania is a celebration of the classic Sonic series. And so because this, 8 of the 12 levels in this game are reimagined versions of these levels. Keyword is reimagined because even though they have a lot of similar aspects of their original versions, most of the level aspects for each of these levels are completely new. Like Green Hill, for example, is mostly like the original version, but then the second half of it is completely new level design, doubly so for Act 2, where they have a huge focus on these zip lines, which really reminds me of the ones from Sonic Advance. And that's doubly so for Chemical Plant. The first act is basically have a lot of familiarity, while the second act introduces new concepts like this special gelatin that Sonic can bounce on, which is kind of similar to something like Wacky Workbench to Sonic CD, but less disorientating. But speaking of which, they also include probably the most popular Sonic CD level with Stardust Speedway. It's honestly very weird playing through this level with a much more traditional Sonic level design. They even have a weird twist with the end goal capsules, where in the original game, when you break the capsules, flowers will come out of it telling you that you've beaten the level. But in Mania, when you break it, flowers will still come out of it, but also grows a lot more platforms for you to traverse into. Most levels of this game have that kind of aspect, and I even like how they even improve upon some levels I really didn't care about in the original games. Like, I didn't really care too much about Oil Ocean Zone in Sonic 2, but in Mania? Yeah, I really do like this level now. It has a really good flow to it. With the only actual critique I do have for it, and this is a very common opinion, is that I really do wish they had a lot more original levels in this game. Because mostly reimagined levels in this game are pretty stellar, but the original levels that are included in Sonic Mania are probably some of the best 2D Sonic levels in the series in my opinion. Like, unironically, Mirage Saloon is probably one of my favorite desert levels in a platformer, and that's kind of saying something because I was never really too big at desert levels in general. But what I like about this zone is that it has like this very western vibe to it, as you're constantly running around different types of bars, constantly going up and down and such, and flinging yourself out of these pistols. It's all really good stuff, doubly so for something like Press Garden Zone. It is such a weird concept as you're going through this temple area that's been converted into a newspaper factory. But then once you clear this level, it then converts into the snow world, and my lord, The scenery in this level looks freaking beautiful, and the music reminds me a lot of something out of Celeste. And of course, there's Studio Obelisk, which is probably the most iconic level in Sonic Mania. As the theme itself is fairly straightforward as you're traversing through a Hollywood-like studio. But the colors, the level design, the music...
Oh mama, the music!
It all comes together with this masterpiece of a level, which I really gotta talk about this game's presentation because I've been holding out for this entire video. As Sonic Mania has some of the best pixel art style I've ever seen from a platformer. Like, I already talked about how well animated the title screen alone was, but that presentation is carried alongside the entire game, like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles. They all look fantastic in this game, with some of the smoothest sprite animations that these guys have ever seen. And the music in this game is top-notch, but I wouldn't expect any more for Sonic the Hedgehog. But I think the best aspects of this game's presentation is easily with the dozens of different callbacks to the classic Sonic games. Now, when it comes to stuff like nostalgia pandering and such, it's a bit of a tricky slope, especially by these days, where it feels like every single company is trying to pander to nostalgia in some way. But I feel like Sonic Mania handles this aspects really well, especially compared to other Sonic games like Sonic Forces or Sonic 4 Episode 1. Where in those games, you can clearly tell that those games were trying to bank on nostalgia. While in Sonic Mania, you can clearly tell that all these references are made out of care for the Sonic series. Like, they reference so many different aspects of the series, like at the near end of Chemical Plant, you're going up against Dr. Eggman in a round of Mean Bean Machine. And at the near end of Stardust Speedway, you're going up against Metal Sonic in a similar race to the original game. But at the near end, Metal Sonic uses the Phantom Ruby and transforms into the final boss of Knuckles Chaotix. A game that Sega has never, and I mean never, re-released ever. Now granted, there's always going to be an argument if the fan service in this game is a bit overkill. Now that argument is kind of debatable, but honestly it never really bothered me too much, especially since if you overlook all the fan service and such, what is left is honestly still a pretty solid platformer. As if there's any other Sonic game that I feel like is a good jumping point in the series, I feel like either this or Sonic Generations are an excellent starting point. As Sonic Mania truly polishes up all the aspects of what we love from the Genesis era. And the fact how the actual gameplay loop in this game is very simple, but honestly it's just very effective. Like, when it comes to most Sonic games, I feel like they strive the best when it comes to replay value, and Sonic Mania is no exception. As this game just really nails the addicting aspects of Sonic's gameplay loop very well. And I love how they pull in all the best aspects of the 2D Sonic gameplay, like, just like in other Sonic games, special stages return in this one, and they work exactly like in Sonic 3 where you need to find them. And I'm really glad that they did that because it adds so much more exploration to all these levels. Like, I played through this game so much, I was able to get Super Sonic within the second zone of this game. And as for the special stages themselves, well, they have a very Sonic R vibe to them. As your main goal in each of them is trying to get the UFO and such, and just like in Sonic 3, collecting all of them will unlock the true final ending. As Super Sonic ends up being in the middle of a fight between Eggman and one of the hardboiled heavies. And I swear to God, with most of Eggman's plans, it always ends in 3 different ways. It's either A, Sonic beats Eggman, B, Eggman's plan backfires on him, or C, Eggman teams up with an enemy betraying him. And so for the final boss, it's you up against 2 different enemies as they constantly attack you back to back. And I'll be completely honest, this is probably my least favorite part of the game. Like, how you actually defeat the enemies is straightforward as you mostly just have to bump into them. But my main issue for this boss is easily with the rings being a bit too scarce. Honestly feels like I'm fighting more of the ring count than the actual boss fights. Not a terrible boss fight per se and doesn't really down the actual experience as a whole. But when everything is said and done, Sonic was able to defeat Eggman and the hardboiled heavies and was able to save Little Planet once more. And that concludes Sonic Mania, and overall, even 8 years later, this game is still really good. Like, is there anything else I should say about this game? It's Sonic Mania. It's honestly considered as one of the best Sonic games in recent years. This came out during a perfect time when the reputation of Sonic was an all-time low. And even if after this game release, the Sonic's reputation didn't really change too much until the 2020s, it was still pretty much a glimmer hope to prove that Sonic wasn't all just doom and gloom and such. As for $20, you're greeted to a pretty meaty 2D platformer that has so many loads of different contents and such that I haven't even scratched the surface. Like, the blue sphere mode from Sonic 3 returns to this, and they're exactly the same from that original game. But instead of collecting them for Chaos Emeralds, you're instead collecting them for gold medallions, which allows you to unlock even more bonus content in this game. And of course, I cannot talk about extra content without talking about this game's DLC. As a year later, Sega would announce a physical release of Sonic Mania, and alongside that is a brand new expansion pack. And with this, it includes a brand new mode called Encore mode, which is basically the whole game again, but with a very interesting twist. For one, this DLC includes 2 brand new playable characters, which are Ray the Flying Squirrel and Mighty the Armadillo, who are probably the most deep cut as you can get when it comes to deep cuts in classic Sonic games, as both of these debuted in a very niche arcade game from Sega. With the only actual appearance is that Mighty was able to appear in Knuckles Chaotix, and I guess they did have a small appearance in Sonic Generations. But anyways, so just like with Tails and Knuckles, both of these have their own unique perks. Like, Mighty is able to do the special ground pound, and since he's the most durable out of them all, he's able to bounce off spikes without taking damage. And as for Ray, well, he basically plays like Cape Mario in Super Mario World. Like, there's no way other to describe it, it's literally just Cape Mario. But anyways, so going back to Encore mode, it's basically you going through the entire game again, but with a very interesting twist is that lives this time around are way more limited. I think the best way to compare it is kind of like, weirdly, Yoshi's Story, where each of the Yoshis is basically a life. And every time you die, you immediately swap to the next character until you can find them in these special bonus rooms. Or of course, with various monitors that are very well hidden within the levels. And speaking of which, special rings return in this mode with a vengeance, as now they've been completely moved to different locations in each level. As since you can basically use all 5 of the characters at once, they really want you to go all out with all the characters' abilities. And honestly, I really do like it. Like, again, Sonic is always known for having good replay value, and I feel like this adds a new kind of like flair to it. Especially since all the color palettes here have been completely changed, like Green Hill Zone being now in a sunset. So if you want to play through Sonic Mania both with an interesting twist, then Encore mode is where it's at. Although, if you really want even more Sonic Mania content, there's always the modding scene. As when it comes to the actual longevity for a lot of Sonic games, I feel like a lot of them are really fulfilled because of mods alone. And ever since 2017, Sonic Mania became the de facto game when it comes to the modding community. I mean, have you ever played a Sonic game and just asked yourself, man, if only Hatsune Miku was in this game? Oh wait, that actually happened, but Sonic Mania has a mod for that. And I really gotta say, it is very uncanny how well they were able to replicate the sprite animations for this mod alone. Like, it's not even as simple as them just changing Sonic into a cosplayer. They literally changed a lot of the environments in this game. Like, Studiopolis went from a movie studio to basically a whole city themed after Domino's Pizza. Like, there are so many different mods that are basically like this. Like, you can play the entirety of the game with Mario and Luigi, and I found this nifty mod where I get to play as Yoshi. And what's also cool is that some of these aren't even just cosmetics, because they actually changed some of the gameplay aspects. Like, I found this nifty mod that adds elements of the Sonic Adventure gameplay into Sonic Mania, which surprisingly ended up being an effective blend. Like, I ended up really liking this mod. And of course, there's mods that include brand new levels, which includes this level pack that adds even more levels into Sonic Mania. But yeah, overall, 8 years later, this game holds up still pretty good. It's not every day that you have a whole fan community that was able to work on an official video game that ended up being one of the most acclaimed platformers of all time. It is honestly crazy just how well made this game really is. It basically brings all the best worlds of classic Sonic into one big ultimate video game. If there is one Sonic game that I think is a perfect starting point for the series, I highly recommend trying out Sonic Mania. It is honestly one of the best games of all time. And hopefully one day that we get a nice follow-up to this game from the same developers. But if that's not really the case, I feel like fans are definitely going to keep the longevity of this game alive. Which is kind of fitting because, again, this game was made by fans for fans. By the Mania, for the Mania. But that'll do it for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye-bye!